A lady from the countryside becomes a part of a secret sisterhood that has a dark story behind it. On the school grounds of Berkshire College, Alexis Baldwin gets chased by an unknown pursuer. She desperately tries to run away but soon gets caught. 6 months later, a newly orphaned woman named Danielle Daisy Brooks breaks up with her boyfriend William to continue her education at Berkshire College, a school for the elites. William pleads with her not to go, reassuring her that he can support her as he just bought land to build his ranch. However, Daisy's mind is made up, ultimately driving him to leave. Days later, Daisy flies to New England and arrives at Berkshire College. However, she arrives in a taxi which amuses a few female students, including Azalea Burgess. The women look at the new arrivals, having gathered their information to choose who to recruit into their group. Seeing Daisy's financial struggles, they dismiss her. Just then, Daisy's worn-out luggage busts open, scattering her clothes. Coincidentally, Blake Graves happens to pass by her, so he helps. Daisy mentions that she's looking for the women's dorm, so he volunteers to take her there while helping her with her luggage. As they walk away, Azalea's group shoots death stares at Daisy. When they get to the dorm, Daisy finds a memorial for Alexis, who died 6 months prior. Blake says she fell to her death last semester, which shocks the newcomer. After this, Daisy arrives at her room and thanks Blake before he leaves. She then meets her roommate, Magenta Hart, who immediately judges Daisy as a farm girl. Refusing to take this insult, the woman claims to have lost her pet tarantula in the room, scaring her roommate. When Magenta figures out that she's only joking, they shake hands and become friends. The following day, Daisy prepares for her first class. Just then, she finds a new suitcase on her doorstep, which is a gift from Blake. Later, she attends her first lecture with Magenta, and they're both in awe of their handsome professor, Andrew Graves, who also happens to be Blake's father. Just then, Blake crashes into their class, wanting to take a little glimpse of Daisy. Andrew then announces an upcoming internship program, which Daisy is interested in. The professor then notices Blake, signaling him to leave the class since he's not enrolled. Before going, Blake tells Daisy that he'll pick her up for dinner on Friday night and doesn't even wait for her response. After class, Andrew briefly talks with Daisy, welcoming her to the school. He also apologizes for his son's inappropriate behavior, reminding her to focus on the internship and not entertain Blake. After this, Daisy reports to the dean's office since she's in a work-study program. There, she meets the dean and Blake's mother, Elizabeth Graves. Meanwhile, Blake comes home and finds Azalea waiting for him. As the leader of the Ivy Society, a secret sisterhood on the campus, she's supposed to be granted the internship program. However, her records aren't that impressive, so she's turning to Blake to manipulate her grades. Blake refuses to help, but she remains persistent and even offers intimacy to get what she wants. The two then end up doing it on the couch, but when they finish, Blake reveals that Daisy is one of the internship's candidates, which annoys Azalea. She then plans to recruit Daisy into the Ivies to manipulate her, but Blake warns that this won't prevent the newcomer from getting the internship. However, Azalea remains confident that she can control her. She then reminds Blake for her grades, so he reassures her that he'll hack into his mother's computer in exchange for bringing his fantasies to life. That night, the Ivies gather to nominate new members for their society. Here, Azalea stands up and adds a new name, Daisy. The following morning, Daisy finds a box by her nightstand with her name. Inside is a phone with a golden ivy logo. At first, she thinks it's from Blake, but Magenta clarifies that it's from the Ivies. She then gives Daisy a rundown about the society, adding that they must consider her a potential member. Magenta leaves the room a little concerned, while Daisy is excited to be acknowledged. Later, Daisy receives a text telling her to come to the Stewart Fountain. However, she's still working, so she replies that she can't. Just then, someone calls the secretary and Daisy gets sent to retrieve something from the admin building, which gives her the opportunity to meet up with a mysterious sender. At the fountain, Daisy meets with Azalea. She convinces her to join the Ivies and uses Daisy's grief and social status to get to her. Azalea promises that joining the society will give her a new family, but the woman politely refuses, saying that she's doing well on her own. That afternoon, Blake comes home and argues with Andrew. However, Elizabeth enters the kitchen and shares that Alexis's death has been ruled out as an accident, so investigations are being dropped. However, Andrew doesn't care about this, which offends Elizabeth. Blake rolls his eyes as they argue and soon leaves for his date with Daisy. That night, he goes on a walk with Daisy and she asks him why he likes her out of all the other elites in the school. He replies that she's a breath of fresh air, then goes on to shower her with more compliments. Blake kisses Daisy on the cheek and she becomes so infatuated with him that she initiates making out with him. This leads them to make love, though unbeknownst to Daisy, a hidden camera is recording them. The following morning, Blake prepares to leave while Daisy is asleep. Before he goes, he finds the phone that the Ivies gave her. When he gets home, he tells Elizabeth that Daisy might be part of the Ivies, so she tells him to stop seeing her. Meanwhile, Daisy wakes up and finds that Blake has already left. Later, she reports to the dean's office, only to learn that there are problems with her tuition. If she doesn't settle it, she may no longer be able to study at Berkshire. After this, she tries calling Blake, but he doesn't answer. Just then, she spots him driving away with another lady, so she ends up going to her dorm room in tears. There, Magenta tries comforting Daisy and invites her to go out to feel better. However, Daisy politely refuses. Right after her roommate leaves, Daisy receives a message from the Ivies telling her to come to the basement. However, when she arrives, she gets kidnapped. She wakes up in the Ivies' quarters along with the other candidates as they're being initiated, as Leia has them recite a foreign oath, making them promise to work together to accomplish more. She adds that their society has created senators, governors, and CEOs since they helped each other. When Leia asks them to accept becoming part of the sisterhood, Daisy hesitates but ends up agreeing, desperate for help. After this, the candidates drink from a chalice, which intoxicates them. In Daisy's hazy memory, she gets tattooed while being tied on the wrist with an ivy plant. The following morning, Daisy wakes up in her room and finds an ivy tattoo on her lower back. Although she's confused, she immediately gets dressed for class. However, when she gets to the door, she finds a letter announcing that she's relieved from her financial burdens. She then attends Andrew's lecture, but she's late for it. After the class, Magenta checks on her, so Daisy assures her that her troubles are fixed. Just then, Leia and another Ivy student named Isabel approach Daisy, so Magenta leaves. Leia then tells Isabel and Daisy to wait in the hallway while she talks to Andrew. However, she only wants to subtly tell the professor that she's willing to do extracurricular activities to secure her spot in the internship. She tries to lure him in, but Andrew politely leaves. After this, Leia and the other Ivy sisters take Daisy on a shopping spree, giving her a makeover so she can live up to the group's standards. Later, they hang out in a cafe, but Blake arrives, which pushes Daisy to leave. Blake catches up to her, hoping they can talk, but Daisy refuses. When Daisy returns to her dorm, Magenta gets annoyed that she changed her appearance for the Ivies. She keeps making passive-aggressive remarks about her disapproval, which quickly irritates Daisy. Magenta then says that the Ivies are up to no good, and if Daisy wants a clearer picture, then she can ask her new friends about Alexis Baldwin. Magenta reveals that Alexis was her last roommate, who was also tapped by the Ivies, but she died shortly after. Before leaving, Magenta says that she knows the truth about Alexis's death. She also says that Will called Daisy a while ago. With this, Daisy calls Will to catch up. She mentions having new friends and that life just became bigger for her. Will then tells her that he misses her, and Daisy replies that she misses him too. The following day, Elizabeth informs Daisy that her application for the scholarship has been approved, which means that she no longer has to be in a work-study program. Daisy thanks Elizabeth, then curiously asks if she replaced the previous dean because of the recent death on campus, which she confirms. However, Elizabeth clarifies that Alexis's death was an accident, despite the rumors surrounding the issue. Meanwhile, Leia and Isabel visit Blake at his house to get the password to Elizabeth's school account. Blake does this in exchange for some time with both women, but Leia wants to ensure that the password is correct, so she puts the activity on hold. Later, she tries logging into Elizabeth's account, but the password is incorrect. Pissed, she decides that it's time for Plan B. Soon, Leia gathers her Ivy sisters and shows them the video of Daisy and Blake together, which is posted online. Horrified, Daisy storms off, so Leia comforts her. The woman implies that Blake taped them and posted the video, so they must get revenge. Daisy wants to let the issue slip, but Leia isn't having it. With this, Leia coerces Daisy to burn down Blake's car that night. However, she backs out the last minute, so Leia ends up tossing the fire, making the vehicle explode. The following day, Leia crashes into one of Andrew's lectures and discreetly confronts Daisy about how offended she was the other night. She warns her that things will get ugly if she ever bails on her sisters again. After the lecture, Andrew reminds Daisy of her late essay submission, reminding her to watch out for the exam, which is only 2 weeks away. When she reaches the hallway, she gets greeted by Blake, who blames her for what happened to his car. In retaliation, Daisy confronts him about the video, though he denies having anything to do with it. She doesn't believe him, so she walks away. Outside, Daisy realizes that her schoolmates have watched the video already, and she's being bashed for it. Meanwhile, Isabel gives Leia some inside scoop about the chosen student for the internship, and it turns out that it's Magenta. The women realize that Blake lied about the internship and the password, so they wage war against the Graves. Later, Leia tests Daisy's loyalty to the Ivies. She implies that she's the reason her scholarship was approved, so she can easily take that away. She even threatens to take Will's land back in their hometown. Not wanting to take the repercussions, Daisy agrees to anything that Azalea wants her to do. That night, Daisy follows her orders and heads to the admin building, all dolled up. She tricks her into going to Andrew's office, ordering her to sleep with him. Despite having a lot to risk, Daisy doesn't proceed and leaves the building. Because of this, Azalea does the job herself, so she heads to Andrew's office later that night. At first, he refuses her, but Azalea manipulates him into thinking that he's living a horrible life and that she understands him. After relentlessly persuading him, Andrew finally gives in. However, she uses the distraction to murder him. She then chuckles, saying that Blake was better. It doesn't take long for the police to discover Andrew's body, and soon after, Daisy hears about it too. The morning after, a cop interviews Daisy as she's a potential suspect because of her relationship with the Graves. She dated Blake, worked for Elizabeth, and was Andrew's student. Because of this, she gets told to remain on campus until more information is found. When Daisy returns to her dorm room, she catches Magenta watching the news about Andrew's death. She then warns Daisy that this is a mark of the Ivies, and that she must wake up because she's sleeping with the wolves. With this, Daisy calls Azalea, announcing that she knows that she went to Andrew's office after she backed out last night. Azalea doesn't deny this, and she reasons that this is the consequence of her turning her back on her sisters. She then adds that Daisy's fingerprints are all over the place, revealing that she framed her for the murder. When Azalea drops the call, Daisy realizes that she's the one responsible for leaking her video on the internet. Because of this, she searches for the camera and finds it hidden in her ceiling. Just then, Blake appears on her doorstep asking if she killed his father. Daisy says no, and she expresses her sympathies for his loss. She then says that they must report this to the police, but Blake says they can't because his mother will just cover it up. This is when Daisy finally realizes that Elizabeth is an Ivy. Blake admits that her arrival at Berkshire was no coincidence and that she's been handpicked by the Ivies to clean up their long list of crimes. He adds that she can never beat them because they have immense power and influence. However, Daisy is determined to bring them down. With this, she goes to Azalea and expresses how wrong she was for turning her back on the Ivies. She then says that they're all she has and that she's sorry for betraying them. Appeased, Azalea takes Daisy in her arms, commenting that she reminds her of Alexis. However, unlike her, Alexis made wrong decisions, so they had to kill her. She reassures Daisy that she'll be fine and that she can now get away with murder because she's an Ivy. Suddenly, Daisy tells Azalea that she just did. She then reveals a phone which has been recording their entire conversation. Enraged, Azalea attacks her before she can exit the room. She tackles her to the floor and starts darting fencing swords at her, but Daisy escapes. Azalea follows her outside and they continue the fight until they fall into the pool. Isabel, who happens to be in the area, panics and runs to get help. Meanwhile, Azalea drowns Daisy, and when she stops squirming, the woman makes her way out of the pool. However, it turns out that Daisy was only pretending, so she slams Azalea's head on the handrail, knocking her out. Suddenly, Isabel arrives with Elizabeth and the cops. Immediately, they save Azalea from the water while Daisy sighs in relief, waving her phone for Elizabeth to see. Days later, Daisy takes a break from school and returns home to see Will. It turns out that he named his new ranch after her, which she finds amusing. She also mends their relationship and promises to figure out their future prospects as they go. Will then sees her tattoo, which now has a daisy flower covering the ivy.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.